I see up there Earth, Wind, and Fire. They too are one of our most requested artists. Just recently, we did a tribute to the late Fred White, and then I'm seeing this beautiful logo to go along with it.
Yeah, it was a very interesting how all that happened. We talk all the time about how all these things are connected. Everything that we talk about, it's like 3 degrees of separation, and it all sort of comes together in a rhythm. Like everything else in life, there's a rhythm and a beat, and it just all sort of happened. And the way I found Earth, Wind, and Fire, and I found them, was there was a guy named Ed Silvers. Okay, and Ed Silvers had with Snuff Garrett. I don't know whether you know who Snuff was, but he
Oh,
managed.
yes,
Okay,
Liberty
so
Records, the
yes,
famous Stuffy
exactly.
Garrett.
Yeah, Snuff Garrett and Ed Silvers were partners in Viva Music, and they ended up selling it to Warner Brothers. And Snuff went off and bought Nudies, the Western store that sold and very popular. Everybody, it's like what do you call it in Memphis? Lansky. He's the one that clothed Elvis and was guiding him to wear pink and stuff. Anyway, Nudies was that for country western, and so Snuff bought that, and Ed became president of Warner Brothers Music. So now he's president of Warner Brothers Music. And when I first came out here to LA to open up Craig Braun's office, I was interviewing artists. Tony's job was to set up the business, and I was to create an art department. So I was interviewing artists, and the first person that I saw, portfolio, was a girl named Ingrid Hinke. Okay, and she beautiful. I mean, she was a model, and she was an illustrator, and she did women's fashion. She worked for Kohl's. Is it Kohl's? Kohl's bathing suits. She designed a lot of the bathing suits and modeled them as well. And then she wanted to pursue her art career. And so she came and showed me her book, and I loved her work, and she was really, really sweet. And it's funny because the girl that was the secretary at Pacific Island or at Craig Braun, every time Bonnie would call me, oh, well, he's with Ingrid right now, or they just went to lunch. And it's like, Bonnie's like, who's this Ingrid girl? Who is this? And Stacy says she's really beautiful. And I'm saying, well, no, she's an artist. Well, how come every time I call you, you're gone with her? And so anyway, when Bonnie moved down to LA from Northern California, I introduced them, and they were like two peas in a pod. They became the best friends, and they just went. Ingrid was her boyfriend was Ed Silvers, and he was a very, very wealthy. They had a place up by the Hollywood Bowl, and she had this fantastic Mercedes convertible, and Bonnie and her would go shopping and partying and doing all kinds of stuff all day long. They would hang out. And so Ed was with Warner Brothers Music, and he had a producer that he was really liking and favoring, and it was a guy named Joe Wizard. And Joe Wizard was producing, at the moment that I met him, he was producing Earth, Wind, and Fire. And we hit it off really good because remember Bones Howe?
Yes, yes.
Well,
There you
here's,
go.
here's where Bones is going to come up again because, Joe was friends with Bones. And Bones, I guess at one point he had said, hey, I met your friend Ernie Cefalu from Pacific. Oh, yeah, those guys are great and they're awesome. And he said, I was thinking about having them, work with the Earth, Wind, and Fire group. And he said, man, you couldn't get a better place. I mean, Bones was like Shep Gordon. Bones was just a total fan and just really, and we loved his work. I mean, he was brilliant and just so laid back. He was in an industry that was so cutthroat and just, crazy. He was like completely the opposite. He was very cordial, very nice, very matter of fact, and real subtle. I mean, he was like a good old boy. I mean, it just and like I said, so he had kind of confirmed. I mean, Ed turned us on to him, to Joe. Joe liked us, and then he had checked with Bones and I guess a couple other people. And so he decided that, okay, I want you to, and by this time we're kind of talking to him a bit, and, and it was over the course of about a week. And he was in the studio with the group. And so he had us come over to the studio. And I guess he had talked to them because there was no internet in the day. So he had me bring a portfolio. and the group was there, and there was Maurice and his brother Verdine, I think, was one of his brothers, and a couple of the other guys. And I was showing them some work, and they really liked it. And Maurice was the guy that was going to make the decision, and we hit it off really good. So they decided, yeah, okay. And I'm moving this way so you can see you don't want to see my ugly puss over there. I'll just replace that. I should have, after I did this background, I looked at it, it fit really well, and so I decided to leave it. And then I thought, well, you know what? I should have put my thing in the middle so that we could see, I could be like this and we could see both things. But anyway, so we got the assignment, and they had already had a photographer, this kid named Lee. And he was a good old boy, tall, thin, with glasses, and a photographer. And so, they said, okay, well, this is Lee. You'll be working with him. He photographed us, and we want to use that, that shoot that we did. I think he and Maurice, or him and one of the other guys, was good friends. And so, yeah, Lee, I said, bring over the shoot, and we'll go over it and we'll talk about it. And he came over with one picture.
Oh no, not that again, Ernie. Not that again. No.
One picture. But unlike the other time, this picture was kind of washed out. Okay. He had the group facing him, and the sun was in their eyes. So if you look at the shot, they look a little washed out. And we actually went into the film work of it and etched the film, because in those days you took and separated you took a picture like that and you separated into 4 colors: red, blue, yellow, and black. And it was physical film that you could etch, meaning putting it in chemicals and lightening or darkening certain colors. So we actually, the picture was really bad. And when I saw it, I said, because I set out the light box and I'm ready to see all these shots, right? Like when your photographer shoots something, he's got 100 shots. He came with this one shot. And I said, well, it's a little washed out. Did you bracket it? Are there other shots? Oh, no, those aren't really any good. This is the best one. And I'm like, oh, man. And these guys are fixed to use him and use that photograph. So we agreed to do it. And he was handling that photograph like it was the Mona Lisa or some shit. It was all, and it was this washed out shot. And I'm like, oh my God. So we had this shot that we needed to really doctor. And the other way to do it would have been insane, which would be to make a print and do all kinds of airbrush retouching. Because there was no Photoshop, there was no computer where you could take it and go in there and do all this stuff before it even goes to printing. And you don't ever have to make something physical, because every time you make something physical, you lose a generation. That was one of the amazing things about computers for me. Like, it didn't lose any quality going from the original scan to a duplicate. It always kept its same sharpness and cleanness. It used to not be like that. It used to be that you had to either retouch stuff with airbrushing and stuff, or you go in and etch files and etch the film. So that's what we did there. And we decided that we needed to do a logo for Earth, Wind, and Fire. And it needed to be just more than the lettering you see that I did there. But Drew Struzan was working with us, and he had this idea to do a symbolic earth, wind, and fire. So he created this artwork, and it's absolutely beautiful. It's probably 25 by 25 square, and all the color is acrylic, okay, acrylic painted. And what we used to be able to do is we would take, he did a piece of line art first, okay, with no color in it, just all line. What you see there, all line, black and white. And we made a negative piece of film from that, okay. And then there was and all illustrations pretty much were done on illustration board, okay. And illustration board had a good surface, either whether it was smooth or a little textured for illustration. And there was a way that you could take the negative film of that black and white line art and lay it on a piece of chemically treated illustration board. And you expose it to light, and it leaves a light blue outline on the illustration board. You remember when you're too young, but when I was a kid, there was these little toys that you could buy that was a box that had a piece of glass and it had film in it, and you could take it and put it in there and expose it to the sun. And they had negatives, and you could make your own prints. But it was a little tiny thing, but it was basically the same thing where you could take a negative, with the area that you want to be positive, clear. You lay that on this chemically treated board, and and expose it to light, and it would leave that light blue artwork on there that you could then and light blue isn't photographic. Like, you can't, if you do something in a light blue and you try and photograph it, and you can't, because blue has a way of just going away. Okay, it isn't picked up by a camera. And so what we did was we exposed the illustration board, and then he did a painting. Like, it was like if you drew a line and then you knew where to paint. So all that flame and the birds going around and the earth and all that was all in a pale blue line art on a piece of illustration board. So then he painted it all. Okay. And so now we've got the painting in all the color that you see, but there's no black outline around it. Okay. So what we did was we took the negative and made a film positive so that the line art was now black and the rest of everything was clear. And we just laid the overlay of the black line art on top of that color. And that's what you see there. That's how we got that finished piece to look like that. The other cool thing about that process is you can lift the overlay and separate the color without the black line art on it. Because if the black line were on there and they separated what you see right there, the black wouldn't be black. It wouldn't be 100% black, because in order to separate things and print them, they have to scan it and make it into dots. Okay, and then the dots were made into film. The film was made on a plate. So to print, and the plate went on the press. This way, we could control the black line to always be 100%. So they scanned the artwork without the overlay on it, and then they scanned the black line art, and they put the two together. That's why the black. And then we started carrying that over into ads and stuff. We were a Panavision's agency for 9 years, and we were doing ads for them like that, where we would keep the black separate and then put the black in afterwards. And it was like, whoa! It would be. Wow. Stronger. It would punch out more. That's why that logo, even on that faded back photograph, that logo just punches out.
It sure does. Yeah. It really represents the group, the elements of Earth, Wind, and Fire, Maurice, Verdine, and Fred, visionaries. And
well, Drew was amazing. I mean, again, we've talked about that in the past. Working with him was like working with Leonardo da Vinci or Michelangelo or something. I mean, the guy it was kind of scary. Really, I mean, how really good he was like, when I say, Leonardo da Vinci or Michelangelo, those guys they studied cadavers and stuff. They could draw hands and feet and arms and look real. Drew did that. He had an incredible ability to draw anatomy, where most people would have to do a drawing and then sit. He would just draw it. I think I had mentioned you before. I mean, if you sat and talked to him for 10 minutes and he's sketching while you're talking, he'd turn the sketch around and it would look just like you. And that's how scary it was. When we did, I mean, he did this piece. This piece probably took him about a day and a half. And it helped to have that blue line on, but after he did the line art, I mean, he did that line art, and then we made a negative and exposed it to illustration board, and then made a piece of positive film. So it isn't like we were, doing anything weird, with manipulating. It was all art. Everything was art. And I have that art, and it's beautiful, because when you put that black overlay down on it, it just goes boom. It gives it a whole new presence. And then, I did some lettering, as you see up there, for it.
Very nice.
Yeah, and it was, and they really liked it. And there's a little story that I've never told anybody, and I think it's time for Ernie's Corner newsbreaker.
I was going to say, you're going to tell us. I would love to.
Yeah, I'm going to tell. I'm going to tell some.
You are wonderful.
No, well, anyway, what happened was Maurice really loved everything, and I get a phone call from him one day. This is after the album's out and stuff, and he said, when are you going to bring over the artwork? And I said, what artwork? And he said, oh, the logo artwork, the Earth, Wind, and Fire logo. And I said, it's why do you want it? And he said, well, I want it. And I said, no, you really can't have it. It's property of Pacific Pioneer. And at that time, because in the beginning I was giving away stuff, and my partner was really pissed off about it. So we designed a sticker that had the big P logo on one side, and on the other side it was blank, and we stamped it with a rubber stamp that said, this artwork is exclusive property of Pacific Pioneer and is on loan. So we own the artwork. You can use it, but we own the original artwork. And that's how I ended up with so many pieces. So Maurice got really mad, and he had a lawyer reach out to me. He said he was going to sue me. And I said, well, go ahead, man, do whatever you want. I mean, we own this artwork. We're letting you use it, and it's ours, and we own it. And so he had this lawyer reach out to us. About a week later, he get a call from my partner who talked with him, because Tony was much smarter. I get too emotional. And the lawyer's going on and on about how, and Tony said, no, you don't understand. This is our artwork. Here is, and he sent him over. Said, I'm going to send you validation of that, because on every piece of artwork that we create, this sticker's on there. Every record company understands it. Every musician that we do work for understands it. They have the right to use it, but they don't own it. And I never talked to Maurice again, and I never talked to the lawyer again. Tony was really smart about that. There were a couple of acts, and I won't name any names, but where they used logos that I did for them on other stuff. And part of the contracts that we had with them is you have the rights to use this on that album and any promotion of that album. Mm-hmm. And there were 2 or 3 bands that took the stuff and used it on a movie, used it on a television series, used it on other stuff. And we sued them. And they paid $10,000. Each one of them surrendered the rights because we owned it. And I had created it. And so we sold it back to them for another $10,000. So, but now all of that is crazy, because in 1976, all the rights got changed. And and again, you and I have talked about this, artists and photographers. It's really a shame, because we got really screwed. Who else got screwed was actors. When it come to the internet, when they would do a commercial, they got paid and the residuals and stuff. But whatever happened on the internet, they didn't get that. So now they can use you in a commercial, and they can use as much as you want, and you get no royalties. So it's as a person who creates stuff, I sometimes I don't want to do it, because it gets to be such a hassle. Luckily, I own the art. Okay, so there's no debate about that. No record company. No, in fact, I've had the reformation of Iron Butterfly. One of the guys came back and he said, "Hey, that's my art." I said, "No, it's not your art." Went through it with him again too. But there was no threat of a lawsuit or anything. But it all changed, and we don't really have. I guess if you're smart today and you have money, you get a lawyer involved, and then whoever you're doing it for goes, "Oh, this guy's too much trouble. I can find somebody else that I can screw." And that's kind of what happened. We were talking about that. I think you and I, pretty sure it was, maybe it was Ivor, about the Rolling Stones thing, and the reason why Mick Jagger went to that art school in England they wanted an unknown artist to do that logo for. They found Pache. He did it. They paid him a pittance. And meanwhile, they've made gazillions of dollars. The record companies made gazillions of dollars. And luckily, Pache, I guess, kept that art, and he sold it to a museum, I think. And now it's sold to a private party or whatever. I think he got like $90,000 for it. But beyond that, that's all he gets. He doesn't get any kind of, rights to get any kind of licensing stuff. Luckily, I can. Because a lot of it was before that law changed, and it was a different law, and it's so convoluted, and luckily I'm blessed, because I have the number one attorney in the state of California, a guy named Jonathan Pink, who works for the second largest intellectual property and licensing rights law firm in the country. And he knows, I mean, he really knows the law. And, you know, I've consulted with him a few times. And like I said, it's cost a lot, but it's the way I look at it is if I was to go get an education in law, it would cost me a lot more.
Oh, tell me about it.
Yeah, well,
I'm a former paralegal. I know all about that.
Exactly. Yeah. In fact, you gave me some really good advice on this last venture, and I took it.
Oh my God! You know,
sometimes it's harder to take the harder right. That's why they call it the harder right.
Yeah.
One of my best friends, a guy named Mike Harrington, a marketing guy, and I'm doing work for him. He graduated top of his class at West Point. And he's the one that taught me about the harder right. That's what they're indoctrinated into them, is taking the harder right. It's not always easy to be right. In fact, sometimes to be right is a real challenge. There's a girl right now, a photographer, I forget her name, but she's been fighting some rights of a picture she took and Andy Warhol changed or whatever. And she's been in court for years. And finally, the Supreme Court heard it. It's cost her a fortune. And everybody's waiting to see the outcome. And it might change it for everybody. I just, you know, I wish there was something more I could do. I don't have the money to fight it. I wish there was. And I saw how quickly, you know, I could arrange people on Facebook. And because it wasn't about, it didn't start out like that. But what amazed me, and you and I talked about this, is how many people don't know what's going on. They don't know. And I'm talking about artists and photographers and people that create stuff. They don't know how what they have and what they create is, how is it theirs and how is it somebody else's. And there's horror stories. You know, Tom Wilkes from Wilkes Braun and from Camouflage Records and A&M. We became good friends. And I think I may have told you, he and the Beatles took an acid trip together and they did this poster. Each one of them did a drawing and he did, and they gave it to him to keep. And so he kept it for years. And then one time he needed some money. So he decided that he was going to reproduce it and sell a limited number of them. And he cut a deal with this printer, and the printer not only screwed him, but the deal was so bad that Tom signed that the guy ended up with the actual art.
Oh my!
You know, so my mother used to say, Ernie, there are people that lay awake at night trying to figure out a way to get you away from what you have.
Yeah.
And it's true. And we see it more and more today with the internet's gotten even crazier. They send you stuff and you think, oh my God, you know, I better pay them. They want the money. And it's all just a big scam, you know, and I don't know. Thank God there's more good people out there.
I fully agree with you, and I hold that. You know, real quickly, you know what came to me when I was looking at that logo? This is really something because it almost reminds me of, because you know, the name of the LP is Open Our Eyes. It has the feeling of like an eye, that logo, you know, like the
with the iris and the pupil in the middle. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, yeah, you're right. I never really looked at it that way, but I can see that now. I mean, with all the other stuff around it, it's almost like if you look at wetness in the sky with a shower, you see the rainbow. Or you look at the moon at night, you see that rainbow around it. And it's, you know, Drew was amazing. He was truly an incredible, for me, it was like once the movie business stole him, Carl Ramsey, Bill Garland, Joe Garnett. It was Pacific Pioneer was a very strange place, but luckily I was able to, you know, the muscle that I let relax, I had to rejuvenate because now they're gone. And I put together other art departments, other companies, but it was never the same. That was like being a rock and roll band that had a hit album and another hit album, and then you're gone. But I never left. I still stayed doing it, and I've held my own since then. But songs.
Yes. I can't wait to hear what your choices are.
Burton used to rag me all the time, you know. And by the way, I'm working on his second poetry book right now for all those Burton Cummings fans out there, and I'll make sure you get a copy.
Oh,
okay?
I'd be honored. I'd be so honored because I love him and you.
Did you get the first issue, first one?
I unfortunately missed out on.
Okay, I'll make sure you get both. I'll make sure you get both. Okay, because we're going to be printing them here in about another 2 weeks. Anyway, the songs, Mighty Mighty. Burton used to bust me all the time for using, you know, that's low-hanging fruit. That's a hit single. You need to discover stuff. You know, you need to bring out, and he was great because he was a musician and he knew how to find it. I don't know. I like hit singles, you know. Mighty Mighty and Columbia Story. I think I'm pronouncing.
We're on the same wavelength again. They were
Yeah.
my two.
How do I pronounce? Is it
I think
kalimba?
it's kalimba. It's one of those
Kalimba.
little
Yeah, kalimba's
piano
great.
that you play with your thumb.
Yes. Yeah. And no, unfortunately the Maurice and I didn't end up well. Obviously Joe kept producing for him. We never did anything more for Joe. Bonnie still became friends with Ingrid, still to this day. She is also the girl that did Toys in the Attic. She did the artwork, Ingrid Hankey, for that album. And she worked at Pacific Pioneer for 4 or 5 years. That's a whole nother story. But, I still love the group. And Bonnie had discovered them before I even heard of them, because she's really into that whole sound, that Motown sound, that, blues and all that. And I was more into the Canyon bands and, Buffalo Springfield and stuff. But she's the one that introduced me to Earth, Wind and Fire. And then wouldn't you know it, I end up, Joe, we were talking one time with Ed Silvers, and he said, "Oh yeah, well, I know Joe Wizard's a good friend, and I think pretty sure that Joe was working for Warner Brothers Music, and I guess Warner Brothers Music handled Earth, Winds and Fire's music, so that's how they connected, and I think Joe went on to work more with Ed, and we did this one album, and."
Great album.
I would have loved to have done more. I thought they were a great group. Once Bonnie introduced me to them, I really got into their music. And Maurice was brilliant, and the whole band was incredible. There was really nobody like them, And again, I was blessed to be able to have done this one. There's plenty of those out there in my career, like the Rolling Stones, like, Cheech and Chong. Well, actually, yeah, Cheech and Chong, because the second album never got released. And that should be one. We didn't talk about that yet, did we?
I don't think so. That would be another good story.
Oh, yeah, that would be a good one. And there's a few. I sent you a list. And I keep adding to that list, and I'll update it here in a few days. But
I love it.
Matthew's Southern Comfort was another one that I added to it that we didn't have on the original, and that's a great story too, with Ian Matthews.
Yes,
and I think, right, wasn't it Ian
Matthews?
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. And I met him at Decca, and really nice guy. Anyway, Joyce, thank you so much again for your support, for your help, for letting me put Ernie's Corner on there. And it's exciting. I'm very blessed and very honored to be here. And we'll see you next week.